Mayor, you may proceed.
Thank you, Max. Good afternoon, everybody. It is Tuesday, January 4th, 2022. This is a virtual meeting of the Commissioners of City of Rehoboth Beach. I'd like to call this meeting to order at exactly 2:30 p.m. Thank you all for being here. I would like to make a mention that before we begin, that Delaware is in its highest ever hospitalization rate. Delaware is also at the record number of COVID infections. It's just absolutely amazing. This thing isn't stopping. And so out of an abundance of caution, I want to remind everybody that we have gone all virtual, including restricting public from attending the meetings into the near future as far as we can see. So I'd like to make that note. I would like to do a roll call vote. Next, we'll start with Commissioner Tony Sharp.
Here.
Commissioner Patrick Gossett.
Here.
Commissioner Susan Gay. Commissioner Jay Legree.
Here.
Commissioner Tim Bennett.
Here.
Commissioner Ed Shranowski.
Here.
And the Mayor, Stan Mills, is here. We have a full complement and are able to formally conduct business today. Also with me is City Manager Sharon Lynn, Public Works Supervisor Kevin Williams, Project Coordinator Evan Miller, and Chief Keith Banks. Thank you all for being here. With that, I also want to go and thank the members of the public that are watching. And I'd like to thank those that have pre-registered to speak per the instructions on the agenda. Those members that have pre-registered to speak are Rick Perry and Suzanne Good, and I'll be calling on them at the appropriate times during this meeting. I'd like to remind everybody that support documents, when they're available, are embedded into the agenda ahead of time, and so this presentation is embedded, that you will see today, is embedded in the agenda. Also like to make note that real quick that the Stormwater Utility Task Force is being formed and the deadline has been extended for seeking applications from January 7th to January 13th. So keep that in mind, please, if you would like to serve the city on that task force. With that, I'd like to make a mention of correspondence, again, embedded in the agenda from Mike Strange. And I'd like to reiterate our program here. We had our first Streetscape meeting on December 7th, and that was we received presentations by Rossi, including pricing and concept plans from Rossi Engineers. Our second Streetscape meeting was held on December 14th, but was abruptly adjourned because of technical difficulties, and we apologize for that. There are just certain things beyond our powers that we can control. And so we come today to a repeat performance of the December 14th meeting, and hopefully we can get through it all. But the purpose of this special meeting is to continue receiving information and discussing the proposed Wilmington Baltimore Avenue Streetscape project, including a presentation by JMT Engineers focusing on logistics analysis to underground utilities in the 7-block project area, including cost estimates. We will also have an introductory opportunity for the commissioners to discuss the next steps, and we will specifically discuss hiring a city project manager to assist with project phasing and budgeting, and of course, receive public input on that. So with that, I would like to go ahead and turn it over to Kevin or Sharon to introduce JMT. And we'll start again with the presentation that we were not able to complete at the last meeting.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, not to repeat everything that went on at the last meeting, but we do have with us today, hopefully with a better connection, the representative from JMT, Jay Smith, who's been the project manager for developing the underground study and has a presentation he'll share with us at this time. Jay?
Thank you, Kevin. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Good.
Well, I'd like to present, I'm Jay Smith with JMT. I'm going to present to you the results of the study we performed on the Rehoboth Beach Power and Utility Underground project, what you call PLUG for short. We did a study and conceptual design for that, and that's what this presentation is going to be about. The study area is Baltimore Avenue from the boardwalk to 2nd Street, as well as some short segments of 1st Street and 2nd Street.
Are you sharing the screen, Jay,
Whoops,
so that we can see your presentation?
hold on a second. Okay. All right, can you see it now?
Nope, not yet.
Okay. How about now?
There you go.
Yeah, okay. Sorry about that. I'll start over.
Slide 1, study area. Go ahead, please.
Okay, so the study area, again, is from Baltimore Ave, from the boardwalk to 2nd Street, as well as short segments of 1st Street and 2nd Street, and Wilmington Avenue, also from the boardwalk to 2nd Street, and a short segment of 1st Street and 2nd Street. And that would essentially, the 1st and 2nd Street would tie in to the existing underground utilities that were done for Rehoboth Avenue several years ago. What you see here is the red line represents the location of the aerial utilities. So on Baltimore Avenue, the utilities are on the south side of the road, and on 1st Street on the east side and 2nd Street on the west side. And then on Wilmington Avenue, the above ground utilities are located along the north side of the street and on the east side of 1st Street and the west side of 2nd Street. Now, our study to look at this, first of all, of course, we had to identify what aerial utilities were present here and work very collaboratively with the utility owners. And then we took a look at the feasibility and scope of undergrounding the above ground utilities. How would we do that? Where would we put them? And we developed a concept which assessed where we were going to place these utilities. And then we looked at cost for undergrounding of the work. And then we looked at constructability and related issues. Well, first we identified the above ground utilities. The main above ground utilities are Delmarva Power, which is the electric provider for the city, Verizon, which provides telecommunication, and Comcast, which provides primarily cable television. Underground, you have the city's utilities, water, sewer, storm drainage, and street lighting. You have DelDOT, which has some signalization, and then Crown Castle. They have some minimal above ground utilities, and AT&T also some minimal above ground utilities, which are going to have to be further assessed during the final design. Now, to give you an idea what this entails, if you've been on Rehoboth Avenue, you see that the above ground utilities are no longer present. And there's ground level utility features that you'll see. For example, in the center photo here, you can see these green enclosures here. Generally, these are electric transformers. And if you look here, looking north on 2nd Street, this segment was also underground. And if you can see way off in the distance there, you'll see the first utility pole where the utilities go back to aerial. First, we looked at one of the most important aspects of this, which is the above ground electric, and worked closely with Delmarva Power. Delmarva Power has the lines that are highest on the pole is their primary. That's essentially the high voltage lines which bring the power into the city. And then there's a secondary power, which essentially is a power that goes to the businesses or residents, which is transformed by transformers to a voltage that'll work with the type of electrical products you have in your home and your business. Now, to accommodate this, to take these aerial lines and put them under the street, we work with Delmarva, and we came up with a four-way duct bank, a four-way 4-inch duct bank. And for the secondary, this is for the primary, this is a four-way. And for the secondary, it's a maximum of a 12-way duct bank. And this duct bank basically changes in configuration as the ducts peel off to provide a service for a business or residence. So this is a sectional view of the street to show how this would be placed under the street. The picture on the photo on the left, you can see the equipment on the pole. These are two aerial transformers here, and in order to relocate these and eliminate the aerial facilities, we have to put them at ground level. So this is an example of what they look like in this right photo on Rehoboth Avenue. So this, essentially is the power that goes to your business or residence. And on Baltimore Avenue and Wilmington Avenue and 2nd and 1st Street, there's really minimal right-of-way or places to put this equipment, similar to what was done in Rehoboth Avenue, where we had a median to place the equipment. So we had to look at places where could we place this equipment without going onto private property or asking for permission from residences or businesses to use their property to place this. And we came up with something which we call a curb bulb out, which essentially is a little island. So this dash line here represents the existing curb line. And so we built a little curbed median area, if you will, out here beyond the curb, raised curb, and we would place the equipment in that area. Now this is a representation of what it would look like on Baltimore Avenue, where you have parallel parking. So cars are parked parallel to the curb. On Wilmington Avenue, we have some head-in parking areas. So head-in parking, you would take a parking space and again put this bulb out, raised curb area to accommodate the equipment. Now, the size of these would be depending on how much equipment you place. It may take 1 or 2 parking spaces. We may add landscaping or whatever to screen this equipment. So that would, change the size of these depending on the equipment and what else we may place in that bulb out area. So this is essentially what a bulb out looks like. This is Rehoboth Avenue. Here's a bulb out that just so happens is in an area where there's a building entrance. So there's no utilities accommodated in this bulb out, but it just gives you an example of what a bulb out looks like and in an area where you have parallel parking. And here's another case on the right here. This is Ocean City, where they use bulb outs to basically shorten the crossing distance on the street and provide places to plant trees. So this is an example of what a bulb out would look like to accommodate the electrical equipment. We also took in consideration the possibility of undergrounding electrical equipment, including the transformers. Delmarva was not in favor of this because they don't have the staff available locally to maintain underground transformers. They don't have any underground transformers in this region. And they have concern that I guess they've had some issues in Ocean City where they had some underground transformers. The transformers would require a large man entry vault. So essentially room enough, like an underground room, essentially. So it'd be very deep, possibly 10 or more feet deep, and large enough to have space to accommodate a worker getting in here to do repairs or maintenance. And would all have to be laid out in accordance with safety requirements of the National Electrical Code. So, obviously with these being that deep and underground, there would be concerns from Delmarva about maintenance, flooding, and water intrusion. So while we looked at this, it's not favored by Delmarva, and it would be very costly to do this. One of the issues we identified with Delmarva is there's 2 voltage systems that have developed over time in Rehoboth. One is what is called an open delta three-phase 120/240 volt system. And then a second system is a three-phase 120/208 volt system. And this is just basically something that's developed over time based on customer requirements. Delmarva would like to consolidate this into one system, one three-phase 120/208 volt system. And in order to do this, there would have to be extensive investigations of customer load requirements and coordination with the requirements to establish their service requirements. And then, of course, we'd have to again, once we figure out what we're serving in that customer's business or residence, we would get permission from the customer to convert it to the preferred system, so that we could eliminate transformers. Delmarva estimates there could be double the number of transformers if we maintain the two separate systems. So the preference would be, and to reduce the number of transformers or reduce the number of places where we have bulb outs, et cetera, would be to get the customers all to convert to the more modern system here. There's quite a few services here in the study area, over 140 services. So most of these are aerial. Some are actually already undergrounded, but for every meter you see, that's an electrical service that would have to be provided from the transformer essentially to the service. Now, as part of this work, there's quite a bit of effort that this entails to convert from aerial to underground. So for residential, Delmarva will cover the cost of the work for a residential service, provide a new meter and new conductors. Then on the customer side, assuming that the city of Rehoboth would cover the cost, they would need to cover the cost and install the new meter socket. So we'd need to remove the aerial meter socket and put one that would work with an undergrounded electrical service, and then provide any load side or customer side related electrical work, reconnecting to the customer's electric, etc. For commercial services, Delmarva will only provide the meter, and Delmarva doesn't do typically any work for a commercial. The commercial customer would have to pay for all the service requirements. So that would mean running the conductors from the transformer to the service, and the city would need to install the infrastructure for that. So any duct bank or duct that would come from the transformer to the customer service and do the meter socket going from above ground to underground. And then, like I say, installing all the conductors from the transformer and any load side or customer side related electrical work to hook back up the customer to the new electrical service location. In order for us to come up with an estimate, each service, depending on what we're serving, has a significant increase in cost from a small residential or small commercial service up to a large commercial service. So based on an estimate of what's out there, we made an assumption that there would be like 36 200 amp services, 73 400 amp services, like medium size service, and then large, we assumed 36. So that's how we came up with a means of estimating the cost for the load side or customer side electrical work. A detailed assessment would have to be done during final design to figure out what exactly is needed for each service. For street lighting, Delmarva will install and maintain street lighting at minimal cost if the fixture is part of their tariff system. So they have specific fixtures that are part of their tariff system, and they will install those basically at no cost And then the city would pay a standard yearly rate for those fixture types. And of course, there's limited options for those fixture types. And if you can see in the photo on Rehoboth Avenue, the city installed these teardrop fixtures. These are called teardrop fixtures. So essentially all the street lighting on the streets that are affected by this, right now it's provided what we call Cobra heads, which are attached to the utility poles. So utility poles are going to go, so all those Cobra heads would go. And so new street lighting would need to be provided. So the alternative is either the Delmarva provided standard tariff system fixtures, or alternatively, the city could provide the fixture of their choice, perhaps a ornamental fixture or whatever, similar to what's on Rehoboth Avenue. And then the city would have to pay the cost of that, and the power would just be metered just like any other electrical service. We also looked at Verizon and Comcast, and we worked with them to come up with infrastructure that would accommodate their facilities. And essentially on Baltimore and Wilmington, we'd have another duct bank to accommodate telecommunications and cable television, which is a 4-way duct bank, 4-inch ducts, and then a 6 or 8-way duct bank on 1st or 2nd Street. And then, of course, there's going to be conduits for services, handholds for access to the cables, for pulling cables, and for maintenance by Verizon. Verizon would install all the cables and all the service updates, aerial to underground, and provide all the manholes and handholds. But the city would need to install the infrastructure, the duct banks, and the manholes and handholds that are provided by them. Comcast would be accommodated in that one 4-inch duct bank, or 4-way duct bank that we're installed. So that one 4-way duct bank would accommodate all of the telecommunication and cable television. And Comcast would again provide the cables and service updates. They did provide limited information during our study, so there's going to be some additional coordination that's going to be required during final design to ensure that we've addressed all their requirements. So this essentially, again, is a cross-sectional view of the street that I pulled up before. Again, this is the 4-way primary duct bank, which has the high voltage, the secondary a duct bank, which accommodates the services that go to businesses or residents. And then outlined in the red cloud here is the 4 or 6-way duct bank that would accommodate the telephone, telecommunication, and cable television in the street. So this, would be added to the street, which is, essentially we have to have room in the street to be able to accommodate all these underground utilities. So in order to assess that, this is essentially a clip from one of our drawings that we did to look at a layout for accommodating all of the underground utilities. Maybe a little hard to see, but this orange line here represents that 4 or 6-way duct bank for telecommunications and cable television. The red line that comes down the street here is the primary, the 4-way duct bank. And then the purple line is the secondary duct bank, which accommodates the, the electrical services, essentially a power that goes from the transformers to the residences. So that's, we needed to confirm that all that would fit in the street. There are some impacts to some existing utilities that would need to be addressed, including perhaps some water main relocations. But there is enough room to fit this in the street. Basically, the buildings are pretty close to the sidewalk, so it's hard to construct these within a sidewalk area. So mainly these facilities are going to be in the street. So what, putting all these utilities in the street, taking these utilities from aerial to underground, what are some of the issues that would need to be addressed? One of these is construction phasing. We have a seasonal situation here in Rehoboth. We don't want a lot of construction going on between late April and mid-September. That's the high season for tourists and beachgoers. So mainly our construction period is the 8-month period between mid-September and April. So during the winter months, there's certain risks to having that construction in the winter. For example, what happened yesterday, snowstorm or a cold weather period. So there is a little bit of risk in doing more of the work during the winter than in the summer, which is the preferred construction season typically. And then we looked at how would we build this? Because there's only so much you can do in an 8-month construction period. So we considered constructing one block at a time. So say on Baltimore Avenue, from the boardwalk up to First Street, we do that block during that 8-month period. And during that 8-month period, you'd have the infrastructure installed, and then the utility companies would have to come in and underground all their cables. We looked at, what about if we award multiple contracts? Let's say we have 2 contractors working. One is working on the block from the boardwalk to First Street on Baltimore Avenue, and from the boardwalk to First Street on Wilmington Avenue, so that we could get, 2 of these blocks under construction at the same time. And, we would anticipate that these contracts could extend over multiple 8-month construction periods. So in the event that all that work, the infrastructure installation and the utility company's work doesn't get done during that 8-month period, would have to stop during the summer months and then restart in September again for another period, depending on how long it takes to finish it. Now, also, there's going to be a streetscape constructed. So there's the option of constructing the streetscape and the utility undergrounding at the same time, which would, you'd benefit from economies of scale in that, and having one contractor doing all that work. And then there's also the option of having 2 contracts, one utility undergrounding done first, and then a second contract where the contractor constructs a streetscape. So that has to be assessed to determine what is the best way to build both the undergrounding and the streetscape. So again, these constructability issues are, the seasonal construction phasing meant to minimize impacts on businesses and visitors, and the limitations and risks associated with that 8-month construction period and what can get done during that 8 months. The importance of the coordination and scheduling, of the utility company design and construction, which all has to work in simpatico with the contractor's work. We think maybe it might be a good idea to include some incentives and disincentives for the contractor to complete the work during the seasonal construction period or whatever time period we give. So if the contractor finishes late, he gets penalized. If he finishes early, there's some monetary incentives for him to finish early. The utility companies indicated that they would like to do the design all at once. So the design for all of the undergrounding work all at the same time, because it all has to work together. And they won't start the work until they get funding for it. And so the city needs to consider early funding for the utility design efforts. And we mentioned constructing utility underground under separate contract, or streetscaping under a separate contract, or all as one contract. That's going to have to be looked at. Another option we thought of, you could consider a design build option where the contractor does, the design and the construction of the work, and that places more of the risk on the contracting team and less on the city. So then we looked at the cost of doing, this work. There's some important issues that need to be addressed, and only so much we can address during the conceptual design phase. There's going to have to be some extensive investigations done of customer service requirements. We mentioned about the 2 different voltage systems. That's going to be important to address, and where all the service locations are. It's going to be important to coordinate with the utility companies so they can finalize their design and they can give you a better, more final cost estimate for their work versus the city's infrastructure costs. Then there's the coordination with the streetscaping. Like I mentioned, if they're all done under one contract, there's some economy to be achieved. For example, you only have to patch the paving once. The paving is, all dressed on the streetscaping rather than, utility undergrounding done first, all those excavations in the street being patched, and then, a second contract coming in for the streetscaping with additional paving costs, for example. And then the impacts depending on how it's phased. The more phases, the more upfront costs for the contractor, mobilization cost. So that's going to have to be considered moving forward. After considering, cost provided by utility companies, looking at all the infrastructure that's required, based on our conceptual layout and design, we came to an infrastructure cost that the city would cover for installing all of the infrastructure, the customer side electrical cost, street repairs, etc., of just north of $9 million. Delmarva estimates that their cost would be around $1 million for undergrounding of their electrical facilities. Verizon estimates their cost to be $884,000 for their undergrounding work. And Comcast, which I'm concerned is a little bit low, but their costs came in at $125,000 for undergrounding their facilities. So all this together at the conceptual level, and hopefully we are conservative with this cost, is about $11.1 million. And that pretty much sums up what our study looked at, and the results of our study and the costs associated with the construction of the undergrounding, and open it up for questions.
Thank you, Jay. I appreciate it. I'll make a few comments before we open it up to the commissioners and then the public. I just want to remind everybody that JMT was hired as a separate consultant specific to giving us an analysis of the potential to underground, because Rossi Engineers, it was not in their contract. It was above their scope. And JMT has a lot of experience with undergrounding per Rehoboth Avenue Streetscape, perhaps per Bethany Beach Garfield Parkway Streetscape, and others. So they've got a lot of experience in undergrounding, so we appreciate them coming on board for that. Would like to remind everybody that the Wilmington Baltimore Avenue Streetscape Task Force, the #1 priority for them in the streetscape was undergrounding. So they were very forceful about desiring that amenity. And they also included a desire to know 2 points about undergrounding. One was about ground level utility features, as Mr. Smith called them, per Rehoboth Avenue, versus, as Mike Strange has been suggesting and pushing, that we should go fully vaulted or fully underground. And the task force had asked to do an analysis of both of those. Would like to have had some kind of pricing differential to maybe help us between fully vaulted and the ground level utility features. I don't know if that's possible. Mr. Smith did indicate that it's a lot more expensive, and I can imagine that would be absolutely true. In terms of the light fixtures mentioned, that we have 2 options for picking a specific design offered by Delmarva Power, whereby they pay for the poles and they pay for the maintenance, versus the city just picking and selecting their type of light pole that they would like. And if so, then the maintenance comes under the city's jurisdiction. That happened, by example, on the boardwalk. We chose to go with a specific light fixture that was not offered by Delmarva Power. And so we put our own in. And so now we are the ones having to pay for maintenance and changing light bulbs, et cetera. But I believe the selection of that is beyond this study, and that's is something that either the commissioners and or the task force would be looking into at some point, doing an analysis of which way to go. The phasing talks and constructability issues we're going to talk about later. You'll see in the agenda, one of the items is to discuss the hiring a city project manager to assist with project phasing and budgeting. So we'll expand on that a little later. With that, I'd like to open it up to the commissioners and see if they have any questions for Mr. Smith before we go to the public. Anybody? Commissioner Sharp?
Mayor, could you go back over, just as a clarification, the expectation from the Streetscape Committee Task Force relevant to the use of the terms ground level utility features versus fully vaulted?
Well,
what was the task force real expectation with those two concepts?
Well, the expectation by my recollection is the number one priority was for this project to clean the area up and give us a new streetscape persona, if you will, was to go undergrounding. Beyond that, they did not dictate whether it should be fully vaulted or ground level undergrounding equipment boxes such as on Rehoboth Avenue. But they did indicate that as part of the analysis, they would like a two-part analysis to look at the ground level utilities, again, per the Rehoboth Avenue area technique, as well as looking at Mike Strange's recommendation to consider fully vaulted or fully underground vaults.
Okay, so just to be clear for me, that analysis will take place?
Well, according to this study, it has taken place.
But I mean, will the step be taken that it goes back to the task force for their opining on it?
I was not intending to, because I think this is a money thing, and my expectation is that the commissioners would then be the one to act on this.
Mayor, if I could chime in as a
Yes,
task
Commissioner
force member.
Srnowski, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think your recollection and outlay of that is correct. It's certainly, I think the task force wanted all options to be considered and the studies to be done, but it was certainly the expectation that it is going to be a big money project and that it was the Board of Commissioners and Mayor that would make those considerations, but have all of the options in front of us to do so.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Srnowski. Anything else, Commissioner Sharp?
Not at the moment, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Sharp. Commissioner Jay Legree, I think you had your hand up.
Yes, Jay. It's not a bad name. I need to, could we talk a little bit more about the numbers that you have on the estimated level cost? Exactly what's included in these numbers? Is the cost of construction management included in there?
What we did include was a 15% contingency to cover things above the construction costs that we estimated. So there is some, monetary number in there to cover that. So yes, there is some, and then the cost of the engineering by the utility is included in their estimate also.
Okay, and above that 15% contingency, there's no numbers in there for construction management.
Because
Because we're going to have to hire somebody to manage the construction.
yeah, I'm gonna have to go back and look in our estimate. I don't think we did, but let me verify that.
Okay, and these numbers that you have next to Delmarva Power, Verizon, and Comcast, those are not numbers that are being paid for by the individual the individual utilities. We're paying them. Where are these numbers coming from? 108, 884, and 125.
Yeah,
Are
those numbers came from the utility companies. They were estimates provided by them. I think the assumption by them is that the city will reimburse them for those costs.
Okay, so those are coming out of our pockets also. Are Delmarva Power, Verizon, and Comcast contributing other funds to this project, or are we just repaying them for everything?
I'm, like for example, if there's any residential customers, they will cover the cost of the new service.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there are certain costs that they do cover because of, they're making money off the electricity.
Yeah.
They didn't separate out and say, okay, here's a cost that we're going to eat. They just basically gave us a cost estimate for their undergrounding work. So,
okay. Okay, so I'm going to assume that those funds are coming from us. Yes. I'm going to assume that those funds are coming out of our pockets. And then you said that Delmarva Power just wasn't set up to manage underground vaults. So is that a dead end for us to ask for vaults underground, or are we is it inappropriate for us to think about that? Because the task force is interested and we have citizens who are interested.
I just want to add, I just went back and looked at the estimate, and we did include a cost for the infrastructure part of 12% in there. So about $800,000 for engineering and construction management. So yes, we did include that in there. And then there's a 30% contingency added onto all the construction and engineering costs. So I just wanted to let you know that. I couldn't remember.
That's included in that 11.1 million.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. And
I'm sorry, your question, could you repeat the question you just asked?
I felt like you were concerned that Delmarva Power might not even be able to manage or to handle the underground vaults. Is that correct?
We pushed them for providing. First of all, we asked them if they could provide us a cost for doing these underground, and they didn't even want to consider that. I'm not saying they wouldn't consider it. I guess if there was enough pressure put on them, I can't speak for them, but they would prefer not to have underground vaults in this area because of the risks associated with coastal flooding, groundwater, et cetera. These vaults would be very deep, deeper than any building structure, would be in the city. So that's their concern.
I hear you. Do you have experience in this area with other communities or other entities that have used underground vaulting? maybe for other power companies perhaps, or?
Well, for example, we're doing something called DC plug, which is Washington, DC power line undergrounding. And they put the transformers in vaults there. They want to get this stuff. The idea is to get everything underground. So yes, there is underground transformers, in all these urban areas. They don't have places to put transformers, so they go underground.
Precisely. And that answers. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Patrick. I'm going to make comment and then go to you afterwards. Couple things. One is, and Patrick might be able to talk to this, questioning what is the reliability of the cost estimates from Delmarva Power and some of these utilities. Patrick, Mayor Cooper, and myself worked on Lake Avenue Phase 1 and sought out undergrounding there. And Patrick, refresh my memory, but my recollection is that none of the utilities would commit to any pricing that they gave us. They gave us a price and they said it could be double, could be triple. We're not guaranteeing anything. And that's my recollection. So that's one comment. And I would say from that, what is JMT's experience with reliability of these cost estimates from the utilities?
Well, at this phase, I would say, I would be more concerned because, we're not going to put a huge amount of, I would say Delmarva, of all the utilities that we work with, put more, effort into it. Now, to be on the conservative side, we added a contingency onto the cost they gave us. So we added a 30% cost contingency onto the cost that Delmarva gave us, so that in the event that, they did come back and say, whoops, we forgot that later on or whatever, we did try to be conservative, because the last thing we would want would be, you guys budget the money for this and it turns out to be, woefully not enough. My biggest concern would be the Comcast, because I kept pushing them to, check their cost, and they gave us something which is much lower than the cost we have in the estimate here, and I basically tripled it because I don't think it was enough. And Verizon, we really had to work hard on them to even get a cost estimate, and they didn't provide us much in the way of detail. So I would be a little concerned, for Verizon and Comcast, because of, they don't have the staff, and they don't like spending money up front. And, I can't say I don't know if it's going to go up or down, but we did provide a contingency on top of that, so that, if it does go up, hopefully it would cover that. So, once they get into detailed design and they start assigning staff, typically they're going to probably assign a consultant to it, and they're going to work on it and, get into all the details, and, you'll find out, how accurate the cost they gave us at this phase. But hopefully our contingency would help address, anything that, they may come up with.
Thank you, Jay. A couple more questions, and then Patrick, you're next in the queue. Does each utility have to have their own underground vault if we went fully vaulted, or do they actually share vaults?
Yeah, Verizon, Delmarva will not share a vault with Verizon, unfortunately. Now, you may be able to share, Verizon and Comcast. We assume they're going to be sharing a vault. They're sharing a duct bank, and there's duct banks all over the place that have multiple different providers in that one duct bank. So I don't see that as an issue with Verizon and Comcast. But Delmarva doesn't want other people in some high voltage manhole that is working with a low voltage system, because of risks and dangers. So nobody's going to be sharing the Delmarva vaults.
Thank you. I think the concept of fully vaulted, especially when you look at the median of Rehoboth Avenue, is very exciting. Why it works so well on Rehoboth Avenue to have ground mounted is because we do indeed have a median, whereas we do not have a median on Wilmington, Baltimore, and any other streets. As you saw in the presentation, we'd have to utilize bump outs, et cetera, to accommodate ground level utility equipment boxes. So the fully vaulted boxes give me a little pause. I love them, but they give me a great pause in that there's none in Delaware. And that,
There's none in this region.
none
There
in
are
this-
some,
none
there
in-
are in Delaware, but just not
none in the region.
In this
and,
region.
I've heard that they need specialized workers that are certified to go down in vaulted boxes. So it's not just your typical linesman that goes down in there. So I've heard. And then
That's
of course,
correct.
and of course the costs. I'm expecting to be absolutely shocked how much more a fully vaulted would be. And frankly, I think, Jay, I'll talk with the city manager to see if we can't get you to give us at least a rough estimate of what it would cost to go fully vaulted. I think that would give the task force and the commissioner something more to grasp on and more rationale for picking one over the other. With that, I'd like to go to Commissioner Gossett.
Yes, thank you. Kind of a follow-up on that, I guess from Commissioner Sharp's question and further discussion, then we do not have a cost for a fully vaulted option in this. Is that correct?
That's correct. Like I say, Delmarva was even reluctant to give us a cost for what it would cost them to, place their facilities underground because of the situation, the risk with flooding and the fact that they don't have certified staff in the area. We could come up with some estimates easily for the vaults. These are going to be huge. If I was throwing out a number, I'd say it's going to be between $50,000 and $100,000 for each vault. And so if you have, it's going to depend on if we're able to consolidate the voltage system into one system. We drastically reduce the number of transformers. If we have to have two systems, we'll have as many as 29 transformers. So, that's going to be an important factor.
So
You can come up.
I understand that. So that follows up a question here. In your presentation, I think on slide number 12, you talked about an extensive investigation on customer load, and the number of transformers. When will that actually take place so we can get some more consistent numbers to work with? And who will do that actually?
Well, you'd have to fund the design from the utility company, first of all, because they're going to have to find out what particular load, why does that customer have the old open delta 3-phase system? It may be particular equipment or, whatever, restaurant equipment, whatever it is. And, it may be difficult for them to convert. So it's going to require that they find out which customers have that particular service.
Is that survey done by Delmarva and paid for by us, or how does that work?
The survey would be a effort between the designer assisting and helping out the Delmarva. But yeah, Delmarva will expect that to be part of their design cost that would be paid for by the city.
And again, it seems to me that's kind of a crucial factor to begin with. Have you, in this, I know this is early stages, but is that an estimate of how long that possibly would take, or is JMT capable of doing that in conjunction with Delmarva, or has that been thought through at all?
Well, yes. We have our own electrical group here, and we'd certainly be able to, work with Delmarva to help that effort take place. I would say, it's going to take probably a couple months to do that, and there's going to have to be communication with the customer to find out, when can we get in there? Why, why is their service what it is? Can they convert? Do they want to convert? So it's not something, we would take on during the study phase. It would definitely be during the detailed design phase.
And one other question on your estimated total cost. At some point, could we get a breakdown of that 9 million, exactly what is figuring into that, as opposed to just the bottom line figure of the 9 million?
Yes, and that is in the study that we provided. There's in the appendix, there's a detailed breakdown of the cost and how we arrived at those costs.
And is that available to us also?
Kevin, we have that in hand. Yeah, we can get that out.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Sernowski, your hand's still raised. Is that from the earlier?
That was from earlier. Thank you.
All righty, thank you. Anybody else before we go to the public? Let's go to the public to see if they have any questions specific to the presentation, and be mindful that afterwards we're going to enter into further discussions, including discussing hiring a city project manager to assist with the project phasing and budgeting. Rick Perry, are you on?
Mr. Perry is not in the meeting.
He's not. He didn't sign on. Suzanne Good, I see you're there.
Yes, I am. Good afternoon. I've listened and learned a lot, and I'm glad that you're evaluating, including the potential undergrounding of cables carefully. My comments, in order to figure out when it makes the most sense for me to participate, maybe now, is just a general concern that you're about to go into budget discussions, and that this project might be a little more than the city can handle in the short term, in light of our about to have to undertake major stormwater upgrades and maintenance, as well as the phase 4 of the wastewater treatment plant. So I'm just a little concerned that Mr. Smith has put a lot of work into this, and I know it's an aspiration of a lot of people to redo Baltimore and Wilmington Avenues, but I'm looking at maybe it's time to think about deferring this for a while. For one of my reasons is that I walk quite frequently along Wilmington and Baltimore Avenues, and I find that the sidewalks are actually fairly they are adequate for the pedestrian traffic at all but very, very peak times, say like leaving the July 4th fireworks or something. And it seems to me there are a lot of other roads, including State Road from the elementary school toward the canal, which are unsafe because they lack a sidewalk altogether, and some school children would really be put in some danger trying to walk along there. They have to sort of go onto the grass because there's a concrete median which narrows the lane for the drivers. Or another example, Columbia Avenue. I avoid Columbia both on my bike and on foot because there's simply not a safe zone for pedestrians. So I'm just not sure, in light of upcoming millions and tens of millions of dollars that we're likely going to have to spend, whether we should continue down this road of having Mr. Smith and other consultants continue to give us these fairly substantial estimates for a project that possibly we may need to defer a few years. So I'll let you decide, anyway, that's my major concern about this whole streetscape. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Suzanne. I'd like to comment, I think we should all be mindful that the 2010 CDP, as well as the draft for the updated pending CDP, mentions this project and values it greatly. And I think what's important to be mindful of there is that that was run by many, many, many people in many workshop meetings and surettes that put their faith in this project. So also, I think we need to be mindful that, we've got a lot of momentum going. I think we want to keep that momentum going. And with that momentum comes funding opportunities through DelDOT. And I would hate to put this on hold for a while and have that money dry up. It's very important to get partnership with the state and other groups and possible grant opportunities. With that, does anybody else want to comment on this before we go to the next, before I open it up to further discussion? Commissioner Legree?
Okay, wait a minute here. I'm good now. Jay, you mentioned that sometimes that you were hesitant about getting onto private property that might front onto the to the street or to be used for. Do you ever have a situation where you have agreements with private owners for easements of utility undergrounding or of placement of ground-based enclosures? And the reason I ask this is we have some fairly large projects coming down the maybe on this study area, and there might be an option to for private owners to grant access to some of their property to face to place underground. It's just a wild question. Thank you.
Yeah, well, Commissioner, there are actually transformers right now that are on private property. So those situations exist now. And if you can imagine, every one of these services is going to have to be converted from above ground to underground. So you're going to have to come up with an agreement with every property owner to get on there to run a duct to their house or to their residence, a duct bank, to accommodate these underground conductors. So there's going to have to be an agreement with every property owner on this project to do this work. So, it may be possible that some property owner, for a certain sum of money, be willing to, allow a piece of their land to be available to accommodate a transformer or a switching equipment, whatever is needed. So, yeah, it's not out of the realm.
Well, thank you, and thank you for the great job you folks have done. I really appreciate
Thank you.
Report. And if I was building a hotel, I'd be happy to have the utilities underground in front of my hotel. And maybe you can talk about some of those. Maybe we can talk about when the time comes. But
well, there's parking garages that have, for the hotels up near the boardwalk that do have some transformers in them. Just so you know.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sure.
I'd like to respond to Commissioner Legree. If my memory serves correct, Patrick, you can help me here. We went on Lake Avenue Phase 1 project. We went to the owners and asked them about locating ground level utility boxes on their property, and the answer was a unified no. And also, if you consult your streetscape comments, I believe he either gave it to me orally or I think he put a comment and submitted it. And he was a major commercial hotel, and his comment was to get those electric boxes off his property. So who knows if they would be receptive to that or not. Are there any other comments before we move on to item number 3? Commissioner Sharp, please, and then Commissioner Czarnowski.
I just have a real quick comment about, I guess it's my uneasiness about whether or not the estimates that we're talking about don't seem to be really quite solid at this point. And I'm just wondering, with others' experience with Rehoboth Avenue and Lake Avenue, was that the same kind of situation that we're looking at right now?
Yes, and if you don't mind maybe deferring further response till we get to item number 3 and discussing hiring a representative. Would that be all right?
Yep.
Thank you. So keep that in mind. Make sure that we do answer it coming up in the next segment. Commissioner Czarnowski, please.
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to respond to Ms. Good's comment. I do appreciate the comments, and I think One of our jobs is, is to look at the budget and the finances and in a very responsible way. I think we've got an opportunity here and I've spoke to most of our state and congressional leaders here, and there's some real opportunities in the near future with road improvement and infrastructure monies that I think not pursuing this, we might be hurting ourselves in the future. And the fact that we've had this on the radar, we might be ahead of the game as other communities and municipalities might start seeing dollar signs come from the state and federal government and think up projects that they can do. And we're in a way already ahead of it with this. So, we need to be cautious and mindful and go through the budget process, but I wouldn't delay it based on that.
Thank you, Commissioner. With that, we're going to move on to the third bullet real quick. And I think it's important to know that what we are talking about through Rossi's concept plan and JMT's analysis of undergrounding is that we've been looking at this at a very, very broad level and high elevation. And now we're getting to the point where if we're going to go further, we need to pinpoint some of the prices and schedules and budgets and things like that. And that's what brings us to the third bullet, which is discuss hiring a city project manager to assist with project phasing and budgeting. This would be the recommendation for the city administration to hire somebody to actually represent the city and specifically to help out with phasing and budgeting. And also, I would say also concept plan review. Phasing analysis by Jay Smith was very quick. And we're talking about something that's very, very detailed in terms of phasing. If you go back and review his slides, you'll see that he hit on high level talk there about phasing. But there are many, many, many things. If you recall, he was talking about phasing what can be accomplished, considering that we would restrict work to the off-season during limited months. Analyzing construction elements, such as how can work be accomplished in a single off-season? Or will it take 1 year or multiple years? Single contractor, multiple contractors, et cetera. All of these things that are actually mentioned in Mr. Smith's report need to be taken into account and analyzed further. And the thought by the city administration is that it would best behoove us to hire our own representative to look at these in more detail. Do you have, Evan or Kevin, do you want to articulate anything further about phasing?
No, I think you hit it very well, Mayor. I would just add one comment that that will be vitally important to us is in that phasing, we want to be able to take advantage of DelDOT's grant program. And they cap out at a certain amount, and our 20% contribution to that, and that's going to be a key element to make sure that we're maximizing the use of other people's money in order to do this work.
I think one of the key words you said is elements. That's where we need somebody to represent us to help us analyze all those elements to be able to determine what the construction schedule is and what the sequencing is and all that. With that, we're also saying that this representative would help with budgeting analysis. And I kind of look at the budgeting analysis in two ways. One would be more detailed cost estimates that I just mentioned. My apologies. More detailed cost estimates, but also looking at funding analyses in terms of where are the funds coming from and what are grant opportunities. So there's two items there. Sharon, if we hire this person, do you have a timeline or budget or these things that defer until the budget discussions?
Thank you, Mayor. The commissioners and you will be discussing this obviously starting next Monday for budget meetings. We have included in the budget in the general operating budget under the streets department an amount of $60,000 under engineering services for a project manager. And then in the CIP, we've also included the TAP grant funds from 80-20 split. If we were to move ahead with this based on DelDOT's approval, the $1 million would be a $200,000 contribution from the city based on that 80-20 split. So they are included, and commissioners will be able to discuss that further.
Thank you. So what we're offering or suggesting is we look into hiring a city representative to talk about and further analyze phasing, further analyze budgeting. And I'd like to offer a third job scope for that city representative, and that is to look at the concept plan review. We have the concept plan as originally presented by Rossi, and each of us has some ideas on what perhaps might be some flaws or good points that need to be further embellished. And I would say the concept plan review would be good to put under the job scope of a city representative, because they could be looking at the original concept plans in terms of sidewalk width, bump outs at the intersections, curb type and height, utility locations, bike and scooter parking. What are some other things? Options, very important, options to increase on-street parking and limited vehicle access pedestrian plazas. So I think we could develop a job scope for the city representative that would help us focus on some of the things that we have concerns are, but also to help us advance this project. Sharon, do you want to offer anything else? The budget talks, will we be talking about the next step, partnering with DelDOT and hiring an engineer, or you want to mention it now?
Well, Mayor, I think the next step is for, obviously, the commissioners to give us the go-ahead as to whether or not, we should pursue this and keep the funding in the budget. If that's the case, then the next steps, of course, would be discussed with DelDOT and city staff. As far as, additional funding, that's what we would put in for next year. I think funding opportunities, we'll continue to look at them seriously if this is the direction the commissioners would like us to go in.
So let's open it up further to the commissioners to discuss the possibility of hiring a city project manager. We can also defer to the budget talks, and then open it for any other broad discussions. Commissioner Sharp, did we answer your question enough?
I just want to put a fine point on it. Did we actually have a project manager that was hired for either Rehoboth Avenue, Lake Avenue, or both?
We did have a project manager through our consultants on Lake Avenue, and I'm sure on Rehoboth Avenue as well. So that would be the case, but I think the mayor's referring to a specific individual to assist with this project with city staff.
Right.
Is that right, Mayor? Yeah.
Is a question.
Commissioner Gossett, yes, sir.
I'm sorry, Mr. Commissioner LeGree had his hand up there before me, and then I'll go.
You go first. I'm just going to ask about the DelDOT opportunity. Go ahead, Patrick.
Okay, thank you. So is it my understanding this would be this project manager would be an employee of the city or a contractor to the city exclusively working for the city? Or would this be a representative from JMT or something of that nature? Has that been discussed?
Well, very likely it could and would be a representative from JMT, not on a full-time basis, certainly, but on a consulting basis.
Okay. And there would be, as you referred to a little bit, a job responsibilities or job description for this individual to be responsible for, in addition to city staff?
Kevin, do you want to go there as far as responsibilities? I think that would have to be determined.
Correct. We'll work with whoever we choose or whoever we look to provide a proposal to develop the scope that would be required.
And with regards to the funding, the TAP grants are, as we've had with Lake Avenue, $1 million is the max at an 80-20 split, 80 state and 20 for the city. But how are we going to look forward to this? I mean, again, I'm not a longer discussion here, certainly in budget discussions, but with the cost estimates for the roadway discussion that we got from Rossi, and then just the recent estimates that we got from JMT on undergrounding, we're talking like a $40 million project here, plus others, the Baltimore Avenue restroom project and the beach patrol project. So that could be up to $45 million. And the $1 million TAP grant certainly is helpful for that, but certainly that's not the full scope of the project. City Manager Lynn, are you going to address that in the budgeting upcoming, or CIP, or is this phasing in, or have you given it much thought about how to manage that $45 million project?
Well, we do have extended the 5-year CIP out for, upwards of $7 million each year. And again, I think that is a broader discussion amongst the commissioners and city staff when we get into the budget meetings. If obviously, we're looking at a multi-million-dollar project that would cost the city's taxpayers, and we'd have to, realize how we're going to fund that. It's, I think putting the cart before the horse with funding, if you will, is really needs to wait until or be a part of the discussion during the budget meetings, because, obviously that we're not able to come right out of the box during the budget meeting and fund that amount of money. We're looking at each project as we go along. Delaware Avenue restrooms, you'll be seeing the Baltimore Avenue restrooms and the cost for that, and other projects that we have coming up. So the short answer is the money is projected in the next 5 years, but how we're going to look for that is up to a broader discussion with the Director of Finance, myself, staff, and certainly the commissioners if they choose to move forward with this.
Any other commissioners? If not, I'm going to go back to Suzanne Good. Are you still on? Do you have any further comments?
Nothing further, but I'm glad at least this is being brought into the discussion because, between the Baltimore Avenue restrooms, which needed to be done, is going to be going under construction. The needed massive, potentially $500,000 a year for the next 10 years for stormwater repairs, and then the phase 4 of the wastewater treatment plant. I would just love to get things better situated, including whether or not, as you know, I'm against partnering with the county any further than we already do. So I would rather we get more of that situated before we keep spending. I mean, it's similar, like, for instance, what if I dreamed of having a pied-à-terre apartment in Paris? That would be the analogous to this streetscape. I can't have everything I want immediately. So I prefer that we sort of delay gratification on. I know a lot of people are keen on this streetscape. I recognize that. But the cost of it keeps ballooning. And absolutely, if a TAP grant is $1 million, of which we have to pay $200,000, but the project is likely to cost closer to $50 million, I see that as almost trivial. And also, the other issue is perhaps some of these TAP grants could be obtained to improve some of the other streets in Rehoboth, which are in dire need of safety improvements. So anyway, but I appreciate your spending, you're obviously exercising due diligence here, trying to evaluate everything. But I feel maybe we want to pull back a little bit. Thank you very much.
Suzanne. So this is a first blush of undergrounding and what it costs, and some of the details and very broad details on phasing and budgeting. And as we discussed, the next time we will be talking about this will be at the budget talks, which I don't know if that would be budget number 1 meeting or budget number 2 meeting, but anyhow, it'll be coming up. With that, are there any further comments by the commissioners at this point? Commissioner Bennett, please.
Yeah, I agree that I think we all are excited about this project. My concern, though, overall is, unless I missed something, I don't see the big idea. And in that, to look at a $40–50 million project, I'd like to see what it's going to look like. And we keep talking about there's all these different little phases we're going through, and I would like to almost see what the end project or what the end product would look like as we try to sell this to the public. I don't see that. Have I missed something?
No, but I don't know that we're there yet. I think that we have to go through this process of hiring a city's rep consultant to do the additional phasing, budgeting, and the concept review, and work hand in hand likely with the engineer that we hire in partnership with DelDOT, and that they work in concert to help us come up with the design and everything. We're not ready, by example, to provide renderings of each of the street. Commissioner, go ahead.
So if we okay this, then we may get down the road where we say we need to readjust, or it just might not happen. I'm just concerned that we all agree this is a great project. It's just I would like us to see what the vision is and what it's going to look like. So if you're saying that we can do that as we go, then I'm comfortable with that. But it just seemed to be a missing piece for me. Thank you.
No, absolutely. The vision is not there yet. The concepts are there. But we don't have all the details and everything. And that's where we still need to invest in the engineers to go forward with that. And Commissioner Sharp?
I just wanted to quickly echo what Commissioner Bennett is talking about, because when I voted yes for the advancement of the project for the Rehoboth Beach Patrol, I took great care to mention that collaboration and budget and priorities are certainly the most important things to me as we go forward. And I think if we can keep that uppermost, that we're going to get there to deliver all of that, then I think it makes it a little easier, especially for me, to think about how do we do all of this and balance it all at the same time.
Very good. Thank you, Commissioner. Are there any other commissioners that'd like to comment today? Commissioner Gay?
Yeah, I just want to say, I think the appropriate next step is at the budget meetings, and whether it's starting Monday, I think it will be in a broad sense. I mean, that's really where we need to start working on the priorities. I mean, I'm certainly in favor of this project, but needing to establish where it falls in the line of other priorities. But I think I'll say at the last meeting I had mentioned when the price of the entire streetscape was mentioned, and it sounds like a big number, but certainly in line with the other streetscape that was done, in comparing dollars in those days to dollars today. But beyond that, and it was mentioned earlier about grant funds, I think even beyond the TAP grant, we're in an era here where if there was ever a time to get federal and state funds, it's now. And so I guess I'm hoping that we can take advantage of that as we go along too, and not lose that opportunity.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I don't see any years into the future where the project would be cheaper than it is
Right.
now or next
always
year or
the way.
whatever. So, you know, it's one of these things. But yes, I think, well, you know, it's fluid and organic, and we will, I'd like to see us keep working on it. Any other commissioner comments?
Yes, Commissioner, Mayor, just
Yes, sir.
back to the question about the design manager position. Do we know when we would be able to see a scope of work for that could be designed by the city manager and our director of public works, so that we could have an idea of you're speaking of the undergrounding and speaking of phasing, finance, all of that information. And as Commissioner Bennett brought up, also what I refer to as the design image is really, what is this going to look like? We seem to have a lot of isolated silo projects here, and to be able to bring them all together so that they're unified and have a unique design that will be Rehoboth Beach for the next 20 to 50 years. I would hope that would be in the scope of work for this project manager, but I would be interested to see that in writing. Is there any thoughts as to when, if that is the way to progress forward, when that could happen?
I think that would be fine, whether that, and we can do that, correct? But I don't know that it can be done for the first budget talk.
No, I'm not requesting that by any means, but I just would hope that this is the process to begin the process, if you will, is to be able to set the expectations with the project manager of what we, the city and the city commissioners, really envision, so that they then have the proper tools and direction and expectations to carry forth the project to its fruition.
Thank you. Anything, Kevin?
Yeah, Mayor, I just touch on one thing. I think initially what we need is the project manager to do, or program manager to do, is to kind of phase this out and to see what we can realistically expect to be able to get done in 8-month construction period, the phasing of the TAP program, other grant availability. I don't know that in this particular scope, we want to include him coming up with, you know, the vision, the big vision, because we have not gone to design yet, and we won't get that until we get into the detailed design, which would be in the first, probably the first design contract we would go with DelDOT.
But the design that we have now is sort of the width of the streets, and, you know, where we put the transformers, and we're going underground perhaps. I guess my thoughts of a design image is the character and the look of the streetscape and what have you. And I think that goes beyond, you know, the width of the parking lanes and the number of parking spaces and that type of information. So is that part of this project?
I would agree, Commissioner. I just don't think it's yet. You know, that'll get into when we get into the actual design of a portion of the overall program. Initially, I don't envision that being in the scope that we're looking for this program manager, at least the initial phase of it.
All right, thank you very much. If there's no other questions for the commissioners, Commissioner Sernowski, go ahead.
Sure, I think Mr. Bennett was first. He can go ahead.
Anything else, Commissioner Bennett? Nope, go ahead, Ed.
Thanks. I just want to clarify, you know, our discussion today has been primarily about the power and utility undergrounding. And when we're talking about hiring a city project manager, we're talking about the overall project, not just the undergrounding portion, correct?
Correct.
And it's fair to say that person would be the one that we would expect to ensure that there's collaboration with other projects that are also happening at the same time, et cetera. Is that fair to say?
That's correct. That's correct.
Thank you.
If there's nothing else, I'd like to thank Mr. Smith from JMT.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being here. We congratulate you for getting through the entirety of the presentation, flawless.
I apologize about the last time.
And we appreciate
the whole
that.
thing just crashed.
And so we thank you. And with that, the next conversation of this will be at one of our future budget meetings. First budget meeting is actually January 10th, starting at 2:00 in the afternoon, I believe. And with that, I will adjourn the meeting at 3:59 p.m. Thank you all very much.